Hey, what's going on? It's Doug Cunnington here from Niche Site Project, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about the aged site case study and link building and how to, preserve your budget a little bit for link building. I'm going to give you a few options. By the way, if you're brand new to the channel, welcome. Have a look at some of the other videos. If you like it, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, all that good stuff. And probably if you're brand new to the channel, you probably don't know what I'm talking about, so watch the rest of this video, but check out the other videos in the series where I talk about the aged site case study. The premise of this whole case study is to buy a done-for-you site and outsource all of the activities as much as possible and then hopefully make money at it. All right, so I'm trying to get the ROI as quickly as possible. That is the goal, outsourcing everything. You can go to nichesiteproject.com/ASCS for aged site case study to get more information. It's not a huge long blog post or any sort of narrative. It is literally my raw notes that I'm keeping track of until I sort of get to a point in the case study where I can share some definitive information. Right now, I'm just documenting the process. So today, we're gonna be talking about link building. Basically, for this case study, I have been taking the option for the highest level of service for everything that I can do. So when I needed keywords, I hired a full service keyword company to help me out, right? So Humanproof Designs is the company that I ordered from. By the way, any companies that I mention, I'm an affiliate for them. So if you buy through my link, then I will get a commission, which I totally appreciate. So I am opting for the highest level of service in all cases because I don't want to spend time doing anything, basically. So when I got content written, I went to a company that had a project manager that managed everything for me, an account manager to work with me, so I'm not interacting directly with writers. I just gave them a bunch of keywords that I got from Humanproof Designs, and then I sent them over. They wrote everything, they uploaded to WordPress and did all the stuff for me. All right, so that's what I'm aiming for. For link building, same deal. I've worked with two companies so far, the HOTH and Loganix. Again, full service. I told them where I'm trying to get links to, the general topic and the anchor text that I hope for, and then they go out and get those guest posts published, they place them or whatever it is that they do behind the scenes, and that is what I've been doing. I've been very pleased with the results across the board. But when I published a video talking about the expenses and how much I was spending in the budget and all that stuff, which is roughly $12,000 to $15,000 in the first 6 months, many people, well, they were busting my balls, I'll be honest with you. They're like, Doug, you're spending too much money. You can get a much better deal over here. You can get a better deal over here. And I'm sure all that's true, all right? I'm sure all that's true. But my goal was to get basically full service companies to do the work for me so I don't have to babysit any part of the process. So there's a couple things that we have to think about. There are many trade-offs in this whole situation. So I talked about this with the content, and it's a similar situation with promotion and link building and probably any other service you can get. So number one, if you are paying a very low amount for any service, the quality is probably going to be lower, and potentially the delivery time can take much longer. There are multiple variables at play here, and it gets very complex. All right, it gets very complex quick. I'll draw some graphs for you in a second. But here's the main thing. You have three main options, and it's a spectrum, right? There's three options, but you could do a blend. So you need to figure out what works for you and your budget and your skills and your goals. All right, so you have to figure this out on your own. There's not a one size fits all. I'm documenting, I'm telling you what I'm doing. It seems to be working okay. But if you are trying to do something different, if you have different goals, for example, if you have a different budget, you may have to do this a little bit differently. But again, it's a spectrum. So number one, if you are without a budget, you have no budget. That's where I was when I started out. And that's basically how I have operated. I pretend like I don't have a budget. It makes you a little leaner, just in general to keep your expenses down, but it also forces you to be creative. And that's generally what I've done up until this point, up until this case study. I generally bootstrapped, did a bunch of work myself, outsourced tiny little pieces, but generally I was orchestrating everything. So if you do it yourself, the cost is zero or very low. It does cost you time and effort and mental energy and all that stuff. But as far as like dollars, if you do it yourself, you don't have to pay anything. Next is if you hire like individuals to do the work that you would be doing yourself, right? So this is a way to sort of like bridge the gap. So let's say you were doing outreach manually, you were going out there doing blog comments, then you would send some emails, and then you would pitch an idea to the blogger and hopefully get a guest post, all right? So that's just one way that you can perhaps get links via guest posting. So if you figure out that process, you could hire people to do pieces of the puzzle. So for example, instead of doing the blog commenting and emailing, you could hire an outreach VA to do the blog commenting and then email to build the relationship and do the networking and all that stuff. And then you could come in and maybe write the guest post. Maybe you could hire someone to do the guest post for you. But at that point, you're like outsourcing pieces of the puzzle, but you're still putting it all together. You're still managing the whole process. That's a great way to keep the costs low, yet outsource the like mundane type activities, the really boring stuff. So I personally outsource the blog commenting to a particular company called OK Relax, just because I know they can do a great job doing blog commenting at scale for a very low hourly rate. And they've been doing a great job. I've tested it out for months before I even started the case study. Very good results. All right. So next is the full service, and that again, that's what I've been doing. So you can go to basically endless companies, but I've been using the HOTH and Loganix, and you just tell them, hey, I want some links in this sort of area, which could be like a specific URL. You give them a URL, the general anchor text, and then they will try and secure links for you on relevant blogs. I've had great luck with both of the companies, and the one big differential between the two is with Loganix, they check with you on the sites before they post it. So they may give you like a primary option and then like one or two other like options for you. If you're like, hey, I don't really like that first one, I prefer the second one for whatever reason you have, right? Like maybe you enjoy the content better, maybe the topic is more closely related to your blog and you just prefer it for some reason, right? So you have the option with Loganix to say, I like this site, or I don't like this site, give me another one. I don't like any of the choices, give me another one. It does potentially cost a little bit more, but you get a little bit more control of the process. So that's sort of the spectrum. Now let's like sort of look at the graph in just a second. But before I do, I was gonna say, I'm gonna draw a couple graphs right now. And again, this whole thing is about trade-offs. So we're gonna talk about like cost versus quality. We're gonna talk about cost versus like the speed of delivery. But here's the thing, right? Those are just those are three variables that I'm not even gonna put on the same graph because it'll get complicated pretty quick. But there are multiple variables involved just with like link building, right? You have to think about your budget, you have to think about the timeline, you have to think about the quality, you have to think about other aspects of it. Okay, so that's just the link building portion. Layer on top the content, and then you have even more trade-offs. Layer on top like the initial site that you're getting and the keyword research that you are able to allot. All of a sudden you end up with this very complex like graph and network of multi-dependent variables that is very difficult to figure out like where to spend the time. All right, that's why I'm doing this whole case study, so I could say, hey, I did this stuff. Yeah, maybe it's a little bit outside the budget, but it looks like it works, right? It's hard to argue with that. There's multiple variables, right? So it's hard to say like what worked when, and I'm not running experiments. I'm showing you a case study. So let's do the graph real quick, all right? So like I mentioned before, the cost is definitely related to the quality in most cases for just about everything in life. So the thing is, like, if you want to keep the cost low, often, right, the quality is going to be a little bit low as well. And what you don't want to do is be out in this area here. So that is high cost and low quality. If you're in the best scenario, right, you want to be up here. This is the best zone, right? So you're paying a low cost here, but the quality is quite high, all right? So everyone has like a limited budget. I'm not gonna fill in a number, but let's say your budget is here, right? So you may be able to like figure out how to get some higher quality like guest posts out there or links or whatever based on your outreach. But in general, like if your cost is limited, like there's only so like much you can stretch your dollar. Now, like I said, you don't want to be out in this direction, but if you could be up here, that's great. Now, probably most of your links are going to be like in this zone and down here. I mean, maybe if you're lucky, you'll have a bit of a cluster like that. You may end up with some down here, but you really hope that that is not the case. Obviously, you don't want to be stuck with a bunch of these, and that's why paying a premium price usually drives you up into generally like this zone here. We'll call it like this sort of spectrum in here. Most likely, if you're spending a reasonable amount of money, the quality will go up and you'll have some sort of a range of where you're at. And you may end up with a couple outliers like this. I know when I actually got a couple links from the services that I mentioned before, some of them were like alarmingly better than I expected. I had none of them out here, which is great. So everything was like, all the links that I have so far, they're in this zone. And I think one of the key aspects of that is I opted for, skipping around, I wasn't planning on writing this in. In both cases, I opted for organic search traffic. All right, so organic search traffic, that's what I aimed for, not DA. So I don't care about the domain authority. All right, that is domain authority, and I don't care about it. I'd rather have a site that has organic search traffic. That tells you if Google likes the site or not. The domain authority can be manipulated, so that's why I don't care about the domain authority or the page authority, because you can basically send garbage links to a site, boost their metrics, and then potentially you're paying for garbage. All right, so you don't want that. The other aspect is with a cost here, you may have a speed of delivery situation. All right, so assuming like everyone has some fixed budget, again, I'm not going to put in a number, it doesn't matter, right? You can slide this up or down for whatever you need, but basically like most of the time, but not always, the cost does sort of dictate the speed of delivery. That's not always the case, but if you need a lot of work done fast, then probably it's going to cost you more. So the speed of delivery is very short. Well, that cost may be way up here. If you need a bunch of work done really quick, this is potentially where you're stuck at. There's nothing you can do about it. However, if you're a little bit more flexible, and this is one of the struggles I had when I was trying to run a guest posting service, is people want the service delivered quickly, but sometimes it's really hard to do. If you're doing the work yourself, then it's quite challenging to get, say, 50 guest posts in 2 weeks. Super difficult. It'd be unusual to try and do that, but it's very difficult to do. However, if you hired several services, you could get many guest posts very fast. You could get basically as much as you want really quickly. Now, I didn't mention anything about quality here, but you could refer back to the other graph. And if you are trying to get something like cheap, right? You're trying to get something cheap, you're trying to get it fast, usually the quality is going to be lower. So these all play together. Like I said, this is a multiple variable situation here. It gets complicated. So if you don't mind how fast something is, if you can maybe make it take a little longer out here, maybe the cost will be lower, maybe the quality will be sufficiently high, but it'll take kind of a long time to get to it. Now, like I said, they're all related. So it's a bit of a triangle situation where it's like you have the cost up here, you have the speed here, and then you have the quality over here. So it's like you can't have everything. You have to make trade-offs. You can have something that's cheap and very high quality, but the speed may be much lower, and it's a give or take across the whole situation here.